Hi and welcome along to ArsenalFanTV. This is a AFTV Transfer Daily special. Back, I've got John Smith, football super agent. It's a pleasure.
Third time with you.
Third time I've had him, and the reason why it's the third time because you're so good, and I have to get you on every time, and you've got the knowledge. And all summer long, I've been chatting about transfers and transfer rumours, and I'm like, I've got to get the expert back in to explain some things to me. First of all, before I get into sort of the first question I'm going to ask you, I'll say congratulations once again on the book. I see that it's now out in paperback now, and again, flying up the best-selling again.
Ripping it up.
Ripping it up.
It's a Robbie expression. I got that from Robbie. Yeah, it's gone to #1 in pre-sports paperback sales on Amazon. So we're thank you very much.
The book is awesome, and I always say to people, get that book. If you want to know about transfers, if you want to know about the Premier League, this is one of the gentlemen that started the Premier League that we watch week in, week out. You, one of the main guys to start it. And if you want to read about it, the book is incredible. We're going to put the link in the description again, and now the paperback is out. So congratulations on that book, John. It's fantastic.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to show people what goes on without pointing fingers. And I'm a huge fan, supporter of Sir Alex Ferguson. Obviously, most football fans would be, but I didn't like what he did in the book and point nasty fingers. I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to tell people how it is and what goes on and how deals happen and why they happen, how the Premier League came to be, what happens next. Actually, this is the interesting bit now. We can talk about this now. We can talk about this in a minute. Do you want to talk about Arsenal? Do you want to talk about what happens next?
Let's talk about Arsenal first, and then we're going to go on to talk about what happens next. Now, with Arsenal, I remember the last time I had you on, you pointed out to me and you said, Robbie, I'm a bit worried about Arsenal, right? And this is why I had to get you back on, because your knowledge on these things is so good. You said to me right back then, you said, I'm a bit worried about Arsenal. And I asked you why. And you said, well, there's all these players, Mesut Ozil, Alexis Sanchez, Oxlade-Chamberlain. They've got 18 months left on their contract. Jack Wilshere, and you were surprised they hadn't been signed up. Now, everything you said has come to pass. There's less than a year now. We're struggling to tie down Alexis, Ozil, Oxlade-Chamberlain. We don't know what's happening with Jack Wilshere. It's almost like what you told us has happened.
I am disappointed. I have to point out though that running a football club it's not a simplistic business. Most businesses aren't simplistic, but it's not as simple as sort of manufacturing clothes, buying materials and selling it on, and you have a business plan and you have a cash flow, etc. The emotional side of running a football club is fascinating. Only this week, our main rivals, Tottenham Hotspur, were being criticised by one of their key players for not splashing more cash. And yet Daniel Levy, you'd have to say, even as an Arsenal supporter, you have to say Daniel runs a good club. And he's now spending some 800 million on a stadium. He's trying to keep the squad in a balanced position. What's obviously happened is the players have got together and said, you know what, this doesn't feel quite right with what's going on in the world of football at the moment. The huge monies, which we're going to talk about I know in a second. We want a bit more. Or maybe we're being stymied because they're building a stadium. And Arsenal had the same thing when we built the Emirates. There was that 5-year hiatus period where it was very difficult, and Arsene did a great job balancing the books. So Daniel takes criticism, and yet you look at the balance sheet, you look what he's doing, he's building a solid business. But then there's the emotional part of the business. It's a bit like that girl that we took out, when we were younger, and there was that beautiful girl, and you knew it was stupid to spend that kind of money, but you just had to do it because and football's a bit like that on a continual basis. So now we've got a position where I think the Arsene issue at the end of last season distracted everybody. So we've now got some interesting situations because there's a couple of people on the board who weren't sure which way to go. There was an owner who, as I understand it, didn't want to sell, but potentially his son did. Not saying he does, but Joel was allegedly listening. We've got a potential suitor in Usmanov who could go higher. He could value our club at 2 billion. At that point, it's very difficult for anyone to turn down that kind of money, even someone of Kroenke's wealth. So you've got all that going on in the background. You've got a guy kind of in the middle of it called Dick Law, in terms of players, whose contract, by the way, expires September next month.
Wow, okay.
So what's going to happen there? There was some consternation, as I understand it, that some of the directors weren't sure that that format worked for them. Arsene's been a big supporter of Dick. I think they've worked well together. But all of that seems to have led to a point where we've ended up with a position of half a dozen players, maybe a couple more actually now, who are coming to that nemesis point in their contract where the other clubs can just sit there and look and think, well, maybe we'll just let them run the contracts down because we're going to pick them up cheaper. And you've now got a position where we've got Perez out there. Arsenal are asking, I believe, 20 million from a non-friendly club, so a club that could challenge Arsenal, and maybe 17 million from a club that is not going to affect us detrimentally. In other words, you're not going to play for that other team against us. And even that seems a bit high for somebody who hasn't quite played very much. I think that's, at the end of the day, he's a good player. He plays well for Germany, but he just hasn't done it at Arsenal, but hasn't been allowed to actually do it at Arsenal. So Arsenal look at it and go, well, everyone else is asking prices that are up here, so we'll do the same. So we've got the same sitting there with Kieran Gibbs. There's a market price of circa 15 million on him. No one's going to pay that at the moment, not yet anyway, because they know he's got 1 year left of his contract.
Do you think with a lot of these players that Arsenal sort of playing a waiting game, and because they obviously want to get a lot of them off of their wage bill, but you'll see a lot of them go out just before the end of the transfer window, do you think?
There's always that. I mean, it's a bit of a poker game now. A few clubs, Bournemouth, for instance, bought 3 fairly early doors. Other clubs have looked and done some business now. Qatar is buying up the world through PSG. Arsenal tend to be very cautious, as you know. Money is an issue. Corporate governance is an issue. So they'll wait. They'll try and hold their line on the monies. They're asking premium prices. The interesting one was going to be possibly Oxlade-Chamberlain, who hasn't really pushed on as a player, but is, in my mind, is a very useful part of your armoury. Now, if someone comes in at 30, 40 million for him, that's an interesting position. I don't know what you would do. My guess is Arsenal would accept the money.
Do you think they'd take... So if some... And I've been scared of this because I like Oxlade-Chamberlain. I really, really rate him. I think he's now starting to begin to show us what we know he can do, and I think he's going to get better from now on. But again, 1 year left. If somebody comes in and offers 40 million, do you think, in your opinion, that Arsenal would take that?
Will Liverpool take 100 million for Coutinho? What's probably happened there is Liverpool have said, sorry, you're not going, and Coutinho's agent representatives probably sat with them and said, well, if you don't let us go, we'll ask for a transfer. And they've said, bring it on, ask for a transfer, because then you lose your signing on bonuses and various other parts of your contract which are challenged. So I think Arsenal will sit there and they'll kind of not invite offers, but it's not exactly a well-known secret that if somebody came out and offered good money, they'd listen. And at that point, with 1 year to go, if somebody offers 35, 40 million, you've got to say it's good business, providing they can replace it. And Arsene said he thinks his squad is a bit top heavy at the moment. So it may just be that he will let a couple go. I'm sure he will let a couple go. It's whether they've got whether they get the right ones out.
They let Ox go. That won't go down well with the fans because the fans really like him. So that wouldn't go down well with the fans. Another one that we know wouldn't go down well with the fans is the Alexis one.
Well, there's the dichotomy, isn't it? That's what we were saying about football. From a business point of view, a man coming to the end of his contract, 1 year to go, 35, 40 million pounds, of course you take it. It's a no-brainer. But then on the other hand, over here, are the supporters. And it's not your club, it's theirs as much as your club. So that's the balance, like we were saying about Daniel Levy just now. You have to get that emotional balance as well as the corporate balance. And Arsenal sometimes skew off in corporate success and don't get the fan balance right. It's not a criticism, it's just a statement. And I think Ox is an ideal example, as is Sanchez. Sanchez is a bigger issue. Sanchez is position is that he's potentially pivotal, but no man is bigger than the team. And there comes a point, well, I think Arsenal have pushed the boat out, by the way, £300,000 a week. I think it's a good deal. I know he wants £400,000 a week, but, you know, you and I were both like that. But sometimes that's just not going to happen, at least not in that frame. Maybe he'd have to go somewhere else and get it. But those opportunities are beginning to pass him by now. I mean, Mbappe's going to PSG for supposedly not on transfer fee terms bigger than Neymar, but the deal will be bigger than Neymar's deal. And that's the problem when you get a country owning a football club.
How can PSG, just diverting a minute off of Arsenal, how can PSG afford? They've bought Neymar, that deal, you know, they've paid £200 million release clause. They're paying him astronomical wages every week. And now they're still going to try and get Mbappe. There's still rumours of them talking to Alexis. I mean, how can... I know Qatar are backing them, but surely it's not financial fair play. I mean, what is financial fair play? What is it now?
That is a very good question. Financial fair play is not working. Because if you're Qatar, if you're a country, you can put together a bundle of marketing positions for PSG that will lift your turnover to a point where you can afford to put out this kind of money and still not breach FFP. Now, that's not working. Manchester United can do a local radio deal that's bigger than West Brom's shirt deal. That's not right. So there's going to be some changes. There's going to be some FFP changes. I know a lot of the clubs, the big clubs around the world, in particular around Europe at the moment, are beginning to look at what happens next. Bayern Munich were incredibly upset that they got less money for their TV rights than Sunderland, who got relegated. And
that is incredible.
Europe's never really forgiven England for taking the lion's share of football emotion out of Europe. I mean, we are the league of the world. Everyone in it, we've said this before, I mean, from Hong Kong to Honduras, everyone's wearing Premier League kit replicas. So I think what you might well see, not the next TV round. The next TV round is going to be big. There's going to be another big hit. My guess is that Sky will end up paying 5, possibly even 6 billion, and there'll be another huge tranche coming in from India, and another huge tranche from China. The viewing figures around the world are really good, so it's going to be strong. And I think we've articulated this before. Potentially, Facebook, who today host 1 billion conversations, as we're talking today, Facebook's community and Twitter's community and Snapchats and Instas will all be talking about the weekend's games. There's 1 billion and a half conversations being had. They're all that data is being lifted by the Facebooks of this world and being sold. On top of that, they're putting advertising around it, and they paid a big round number for that privilege. Nothing. Huge industry. People like you influence it, dramatically influence it in your case. So Facebook have got to look at this and say, we've got the planet now. I mean, they've got drones sitting over Africa uplifting signals from mobile phones because people don't have landlines there. As best we know, there's no big congregation up in Mars looking to join Facebook. So they've got to get more out of this planet, which means they potentially will go and buy content, because then they've bought loyalty, and they can then amortize that content and then market to it and sell to it and grow it, which means that if they wrote out a check for 10 billion for the Premier League, it wouldn't dent their wealth one jot. It's like you and me sharing a Red Bull tonight. It's no big deal for them financially. So, I mean, it is, but it's not. So, next TV round, 2019, I think we're going to knock the doors of 10 billion. And what comes next is interesting. Are the tech companies, the IT companies going to play? If they play, we're going to potentially go beyond. Well, we could hit 10 billion and beyond, which means that this market isn't going anywhere, which is fairly dangerous, because you're now in a position where Bayern Munich are fed up. Juventus say, you know, our league is not relevant financially to the English Premier League, which is doing this. It's growing away from us. Europe will try and bring that back into Europe. which means that you will see, I think, enhanced conversations with UEFA, or even without UEFA, of a new European Super League, which will take the high ground from the EPL in years to come. I'm not saying the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And I think in between all that time, there will then be some legislation that will try to cap what's going to happen. For instance, you don't have to say to players, you can't earn more than £200,000 a week. What you can say is every club has a budget of 500 million. That's your wage budget. You can give one player 400 million if you want, and the rest have got to share 100. But that's your wage cap.
It's similar to what they do in American sports, isn't it?
Yeah, very similar. But it's beginning to level that playing field, because now you've got United Arab Emirates owning Man City, Qatar owning PSG, and some very, very wealthy individuals who can blow away other clubs.
With Arsenal then, is it then time for them to maybe, you said about the maybe £2 billion valuation, would it be time for maybe Stan Kroenke to just say, well, you know what, this game has just gone beyond me now. You've got to be a multi-billionaire. Well, he is a multi-billionaire, isn't he? But you've got to be prepared to spend that sort of money to stay in it, to buy Neymars and people like that, and maybe pass it to Usmanov, who could do that, couldn't he? Because he is a very rich guy.
I think it'll all depend on what happens in the next few months. On Friday night, there were some wonderful moments, and there were shades of dark as well. There were moments when the stadium, you could look around it and you think, oh, it's beginning to feel like it did last April. And that's just under the surface. So it can't be nice to hear anyone say, give us our club back, we don't want you around us anymore. If Usmanov wants to offer more, and I believe he can, in fact I'm sure he can, and he's playing the long game, and there comes a moment when it turns, he will, in my opinion, pick up that moment to try and buy this club. If he's in position, I guess one of the first things he will do is spend and regrow Arsenal Football Club again in his image or in his aspiration. For the time being, we've got 3 weeks left of the window. I can see Arsenal doing a little bit more business. I can see a couple of players leaving. I can see possibly one coming in. There's some interesting things going on in the Arsenal hierarchy. Darren Burgess is now there as the physical coach, which Arsene brought in. He's going back to Australia to be with the Australians. He's with one of the Australian teams for 6 months. And I think Arsenal have had a physicality problem. They seem to bring them back a bit early, and then they get injured again. We carry far too many injuries. So I think Arsenal's medical review will be interesting and actually will support a slightly smaller squad. Other than that, we have not made a lot of changes. Hosfahi, I never pronounce his name right. He was the lawyer at Sky. He's now in looking after Arsenal's contractual positions. I think we're a stable, well-run club. Ivan does a good job. Arsene's going to have a fascinating 6 months. I just hope he gets away to a good start, because we don't want that negativity creeping in again.
Yeah, I know you know Arsene Wenger personally. You know, he's a very good friend of yours. Was you surprised that he stayed on? Did you think that maybe he might say, the time has come? I'm not saying he'd stay Wenger in or out, by the way. I'm just saying, was you a bit so, because you know him better than anybody. I
get very caught with Arsene because I'm a huge fan of his, both personally and professionally. He's a highly intelligent, very enjoyable human being, and a damn good football coach. And it's on this premise that this club, was actually built. And I sit and I look at what's happened to Usain Bolt, and I sit and look what's happened to.
That's a good analogy, that is.
I sit and look what's happened to Mo Farah. Everyone has a window. And I sat there, and I kind of wanted Arsene to go last season, but I wanted him to go on a high. I didn't want him to go in a kind of old Jewish expression, a little matzo pudding. I just didn't want it to be that way. Now he's there, I want him to do well, but no one's forever. And I just think, I kind of felt that it was his time, but while he's there, we should support him.
John, the book is brilliant. Tell us about the book again. Where can we get it from? I mean, it's The Deal. I've read it. It's a fantastic book. If you want to know about the life of a football agent, the life of someone who put the Premier League together, and just the life of this incredible person, it's all in the book. Tell us about it again.
The Deal is kind of my life, how I did what I did, ended up in the football business, and how I was fortunate enough to be there with people like Rupert Murdoch and David Dean when we were helping to put together the Premier League. I've watched it, I've seen it all, I've tried to explain what goes into a deal. The £100,000 a week player, or sometimes isn't a £100,000 a week player, it's 60, and what constitutes the bonuses. What's fascinating now, and we put an afterword in the paperback, is the new practices that are happening. So now if you're an agent and you want to sign a player, inevitably you have to advance, shall we say, promotional monies to various members of the contingent of the player, which may be the family, could be the uncle, could be the local butcher, it could be whatever it is, because everyone sees this player as an oil well in their garden. And although it breaches FA regulations, you're not allowed to pay inducements, you can sort of pay advances against future income. And it's become a whole new business now. It's become what we had in the 90s and what we carried on into the 2000s has now become a very rapacious and badly regulated agency world, because the Football Association actually don't really know, bless them, I know they try, but they don't really know how to regulate this. They don't know where the dark corners are. The big agents can show them, or most of the agents can show them where the dark corners are and where to shine the torch. They're more concerned with having regulations that say you can't transfer a player if you've been involved with a player beyond twice in a particular period, rather than look at club deals that have been done and where the money's gone and how that money's being regulated. So my big frustration, and I articulate across the pages of the book, is how the business of football really works. And I hope it allows the people that read it to see that agents, some of us, are actually not the bad guys. We're actually the people that are part of the heartbeat of the business. And I want them to have a look at what this business is and where it's going. Because as I said just now, in the next 10 years, 5 years in particular, you can't look beyond 10 years these days, but certainly the next 5 years is going to be a fascinating position. And one last thing, I'm aware, because of my relationships at FIFA, that from September, they're going to start looking at the transfer regulations again. And FIFA are going to get more involved. The new administration are going to look at why these fees have gone from here to here to here. And is it healthy? Should it be capped? Should it be regulated? I don't like regulation, particularly. I don't like regulation in terms of corporate enterprise, I mean. But I think as a governing body, you need to see that, I mean, even things like Jason Pickford at 30 million quid, and some of the monies that have been spent in the last few weeks are astonishing. The guy was 10 million 2 years ago, is now 35 million. You know, that's, I'm not saying it's unhealthy, but people need to keep an eye on it, because it becomes unrealistic, and then the competition lower than the senior clubs fall away and you have no league.
Just before you go, I'm going to hit you with a few quick fire questions, right? So, Neymar, you as a football agent, is he worth the fee? 200 million, rising, it could be over $500 million in the end. People say the amount of shirts he'll sell, this, that. Long term, will he be worth it for PSG? Yes or no?
My instant answer is no. Is your house worth what you say it's worth? It's only worth that if someone's going to pay it. So someone paid 200 million, they think he's worth that. My personal view is he's not worth that now.
Mbappe, 18 years of age, up and coming, rising star. Will he be worth, like, say then, paying, say, 110 million for him? Because later he's only 18 and he's got years to go.
Hasn't done it yet. How can you value a player at over £100 million who's 18 and hasn't really done it yet? I mean, he looks good. But, you know, my car looks good. All right. As well, by the way.
All right. You're in charge of Alexis Sanchez. You're managing him. You've managed bigger guys than Alexis Sanchez. You've managed Diego Maradona before, right? You've been his agent. You're Alexis's agent. What would you be advising him right now?
That's a really fascinating question, because at £300,000 a week at Arsenal, he's got intrinsic value. His outreach, his financial outreach is strong. If you can get £400,000 a week at a senior club and the tax regimes work for you, good luck. He's done a good job for Arsenal. As an Arsenal fan, if he said, now, I'm off, I don't have a problem with that. It's his life. He's got one big move left in him. So why not? To go to China or something like that for 400,000, I think would be a bit of a cop-out. So what am I? Am I hopeful?
Would you advise? No, but what would you advise him? Would you, purely from a business point of view now, from you're his agent, you're not an Arsenal supporter, what would you advise him? Stay at Arsenal, or would you say to him, move on?
I think being in London, in the Premier League, being at Arsenal is a place to be. I would try and squeeze a little bit more than 300 out by being clever, not just asking for more. There are ways you can get more money. And I would wrap up a commercial, one of Arsenal's sponsors, into the deal, which would immediately add more value if it's not already in there. I haven't seen his deal, but there are ways of making that 300 a little bit more, and I'd say thanks very much, I'm here.
Okay. Release clauses. Waste of time?
If you're Qatar, yes. But everywhere else, no. I mean, it works, but, you know, when you've got 150 years of gas underneath your country and money doesn't matter, then they are inconsequential.
And no, I'm not going to ask you no more. I'll put you under enough pressure as it is. Listen, thanks very much. You've been brilliant. The book's brilliant. Once again, tell them where they can get it from.
You can get it from Smith's, Waterstones, Amazon, or Robbie's back garden.
Not exactly my back of my car, but the link will be in the description below. John, thanks very much once again. Brilliant as usual. I could talk to him all day. I always say that, but I really could talk to him all day about transfers. And thanks for watching this special edition of AFTV Transfer Daily.